I believe that there's this pooling of information. There's this merging of both human and artificial intelligence. And it's really helping us solve or tackle hard problems and drive innovation. And it's just going to continue to be that way. There's this idea of the collective, this idea of partnership, and the different disciplines within our industry and across industries really need to come together for this technology to really work out for us. It needs to be beyond just the single entities or the single companies. It needs to be a collective effort.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Augmented AI, and I'm excited that you're tuning in to the Shift AI podcast, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I am thrilled to have Kristen Forward as our guest. Kristen is a design technology futures leader at NBBJ, one of Seattle's preeminent architecture firms, where she's spearheading the integration of AI and computational design into architectural practice. If you're interested in how AI and computational design are transforming the future of architecture and workplace design, you won't want to miss this episode. We also want to send out a special thank you to Augmented AI for sponsoring this episode. This is going to be a great show, and we're super excited to have Kristen on today. We can't wait to hear more from her. Let's get to it. All right, Kristen, welcome to the Shift AI podcast. I'm really excited to have you on today.
Hey, Boaz. Really excited to be here.
Well, like I always do, I want to start the show and just read you back some of your experience so the audience can get to know you a little better. And then once I do, you can push back if I get it right or wrong. You can let me know. So you have an interesting background. You actually started not as an architect, but you started in the business world, in the financial services world, but decided that you wanted to be more creative. And so you got a job in Calgary with a construction company. And the construction company was called McGregor Construction. It dealt with logistics and other kinds of facilities management. You moved back to school, deciding that you were excited about architecture and computing, and you became an architectural research assistant. You delved deeper into research, but primarily focused on computing and design. Now, eventually, you landed yourself at NBBJ Architects, which is one of the preeminent Seattle architecture firms. And your title is interesting to me, and I want you to kind of tell us a little bit more about that. But you're a senior associate. You're a design technology futures leader, and you're pushing the firm into new territory in the AI space, machine learning, computational design. And we're going to get into a lot more of that. But did I get the timeline correct? Was I close?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. That sounds about right. Awesome. Yeah, the futures role is quite new. My main position in the firm since I started 4 years ago has mainly been focused on computation, and that team are really evangelists for emerging technology in general. And when generative AI came on the scene, I just had a very loud voice with how much I think that this technology would be transformative in the company. And so the firm leadership saw that and discussed how we could make that a more permanent role for me. So since about a year, I've been focusing pretty heavily on the implementation of emerging technologies like AI.
Now, I'm a recovering architect, so I know NBBG. And I'm a recovering architect, so I know NBBJ very well. But a lot of folks in the audience who are in the technology space may not have heard of them. So could you just describe NBBJ and the role they play in the Seattle architecture community, but also globally?
Absolutely. So NBBJ has been around for over 80 years now. It primarily deals with corporate commercial work and healthcare. So big tech companies are a common client. Amazon, Microsoft, Samsung, those are some of the big companies that NBBJ works with, specifically on the future of workplace design. And the other part of NBBJ, I would say, is very focused on healthcare, hospitals, life sciences, laboratories. We have a wealth of expertise in this area, and it keeps growing. We have entire consulting practices based around it, constantly talking with surgeons and nurses. And we just have this growing community focused on what the future of health is and building the infrastructure for them.
So before we get into it and talk about your role and about what NBBJ is doing on the computational and design side, I want to take a step back. You're from Canada, right? You're Calgary. And
Vancouver, actually.
Oh, Vancouver. I see. Went to school in Calgary, but grew up in Vancouver.
Yes.
So what was your family life like? Were your parents creative? Were they more on the technology side? What was the family background?
Yeah, it's a big difference between mom and dad. My father was an investment advisor, and so that's why I started to follow in his footsteps into the finance world. But it turns out I have more of my mother in me, and she's an artist. She was a stay-at-home mom for the majority of my upbringing, but she actually moved in to become a creative director in the dance company that I was part of growing up.
Oh,
and she learned some software skills, got really good in Photoshop. She did a lot of creative work with the photo shoots and the program design and just the general marketing of the company. And she even taught kids creative dance. If you think of those two things, I'm kind of like the perfect mix of both of them. I have a very practical mind. I have a very systematic mind like my father. And then I have a very creative mind like my mom. And since she did that, she's retired and she is painting a lot. So she's got that creative spark going still.
Nice. So when you were growing up in Vancouver in the early days, what was the first job where you actually got a paycheck?
I was a customer service representative at a cruise company in Vancouver. Here in Vancouver, we have this wonderful port where the cruise ships come, Canada Place. And I got this job through a friend of mine, and it was mainly checking people into the cruise in the afternoons. In the afternoons. We disembarked in the morning and embarked people later on in the day. And I had to do a lot of public speaking because I put people on buses and made this announcement to them, like, thank you for traveling with Princess Cruises, enjoy Vancouver or your destination. And I actually got to meet some interesting people that came along. We had some, I guess, VIP people that came through, and we had to give them special treatment to check them into their cruise experience.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you're doing a lot of public speaking now, I know. So I'm sure that has come into play, and that experience is come into play now in your current job. So let's talk about that a little bit. One of the things that I've always been impressed with NBBJ is how much they've invested in design computation. They've always were super early, no matter what the new technology was. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about, in the context of architecture, you guys are very forward thinking when it comes to computation and design. How do you think about it in the context of architecture, like pushing the edges of computing and architecture?
Absolutely. Yes, NBBJ has been a front runner, but in general, the architecture industry has really veered towards computational technologies because of the nature of the work. Drafting tables went away some odd years ago in replacement for CAD software or computer automated drawing software. And it kind of just flourished into this technical ecosystem for how we design buildings and create drawings. And probably over around 15 years ago, maybe a bit less, this software came into play called Grasshopper through the design and modeling software called Rhinoceros. And that really got people to get excited about what numbers could really do for design. It's all about points, planes, and vectors, and you program where geometry moves in a space. And then from there, it's just become all about data. You think about geometry in terms of the data, and building information management has kind of come on the scene as well. And so there's a lot of skill involved with understanding how elements in a building are interacting with one another, the information that they give us, how we can analyze different parts of that. When that technology Grasshopper came about, it started off being something that was driving really amazing forms. Like, it was very formal, and people kind of saw it as this thing where, you wanted to create some crazy pavilion or some weird wall or something really crazy. It then has become a lot more about data management. And so it's getting very embedded into the nature of work in a lot of firms. NBBJ was quick to start working with it and innovate with it. But I would say that now most of the industry picks up these tools.
It's so interesting because I think most people think about architecture and they think about the creative and the visual side of it. You know, the hand of a single architect creating all these wonderful works and artistic forms. And this is really much more about the data and about information related to the companies that you're working for and projects, and letting the data kind of let the architecture unfold. It's much less about the hand of the architect creating, and much more about, hey, let's let the data inform the way that this building comes together. And then formally, it may turn out into an interesting form, but let's let the data decide. Is that a fair representation of the way that you think about it and the way that this is kind of playing out in architecture offices?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly how I would define it. And I think it's even more the case that we're using data to drive our designs with the introduction of AI into our practice now. You know, being able to leverage different data sets from the internet, from within our company, it's really helping us understand the requirements that would drive designs in a more intelligent manner and connect that back to what really matters in the project. You know, it could be sustainability data. It could be data that the client really wants us to be working with.
So that's really interesting. I want to hear more about that. I mean, obviously on this show, we talk about the future of work and we talk about AI. So give me an example of the way that AI and data is playing into the way that a building unfolds in terms of its form, its design. So can you give me an example of something recent?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that architects are moving more towards. We've always been including performance data. It's something that AI is going to help with. It's going to help streamline with predictive analysis, just making sure that we can get that real-time feedback from our designs. But we've already worked with performance data really intensely in our design processes up until now. In the future, I think the vision is that we can integrate a lot more prediction around cost and supply chain and compliance data. This is really where people are doing a lot of tests, including myself and my colleagues. We're very interested in asking questions of building code, getting immediate feedback on the designs in terms of regulation. And it's not like there's just one set of rules that we have to abide by when designing. There, you know, especially in healthcare design, there's a myriad of regulations that we constantly have to think of. And so I foresee there's going to be this state where we are able to get feedback with all the different requirements that we have for the building, plus some extra requirements that the clients might have. I kind of have this idea of different project models. So, you know, we're working with foundation models and we're trying to fine tune those models to give us information. With our internal information, we're doing retrieval augmented generation with our internal data sets, specifically right now on our RFIs, or requests for information. And that's to reduce our risk. So when we're designing, we can get immediate feedback saying, oh, this kind of detail has sparked a lot of questions in the past. This is how you might want to address it, or maybe avoid that detail in the future. But in the future, we really want to move towards having the information more readily available for a specific project. So we can build in different data sets given that project type, given the client. You know, we might have historical information on a client. We might work with the client to say, what information do you think needs to be readily available to the project team from the onset through the end phase of a project and even beyond? And so we can keep this running knowledge of a project and then retain that knowledge afterwards, which is the best part. So we learn from our projects and have that continuous cycle of learning. And we're not just doing a project and then harvesting it for information and probably missing a lot of stuff, and then not learning from our successes and our mistakes as well as we could.
Before we go further with the interview, I want to take a moment to tell you about one of our podcast sponsors, Augmented AI, and how they are transforming businesses with Gen AI solutions. Augmented AI specializes in helping organizations uncover and address internal workflow challenges that Gen AI can solve. Their comprehensive process starts by identifying and prioritizing business problems, and then assessing each based on value, effort, and risk. Once a problem is selected, the Augmented AI team tests and validates the solution to ensure that it works. Only after this thorough validation do they draft technical requirements, which serve as a blueprint for building and deploying the solutions. The real beauty of partnering with augmented AI is that they don't just stop at strategy and feasibility studies. They actually stand up the solutions and manage them for you so you can focus on what you do best. If you're interested in experiencing this innovative approach to deploying Gen AI solutions, visit simplyaugmented.ai and click on the Learn More button. That's simplyaugmented.ai. Now back to the episode. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I imagine that this is such a new way of thinking about architecture and design that there's probably a lot of training involved in getting the rest of the firm up to speed. Are you involved in that? And can you talk a little bit about how that looks and what kind of pushback that you're
Absolutely.
getting, or is there enthusiasm?
Yeah, I would say there's more enthusiasm than pushback. Architects are generally curious individuals, and they get very excited about new technology, especially in this company. I mean, the culture is very innovative. But it kind of started with, we need to get a policy in place because there's so much we don't know. And that was the first sort of introduction that I got into the very high level leadership in this sense. I started working directly with our legal counsel and reading terms of service for all these tools that we wanted to implement, and quickly realized that we can give policies to people, but we have to educate them on what this means. You know, we're reading copyright law and it's not there yet to educate us on exactly how we need to behave. And so the onus really is on the creatives to understand what it means to be using certain AI tools, especially when it comes to image generation. That's the first place that architects went to. I mean, it started becoming a thing before text generation really proliferated. And immediately when people started using the tools, they were putting in architects' names like Zaha Hadid and Frank Lloyd Wright, and, you know, trying to recreate works of famous architects or famous artists. And I even did that. The first thing I put into Midjourney 2 years ago was, a design by Zaha. And, it got me something looking interesting and close to Zaha's designs. But, I'm trying to teach people that it really is our responsibility to use these tools ethically. There's no one there's no one there to tell you not to. Yeah. Some of the tools will not let you do that now, especially Adobe's products. I think that the video generation technologies are pretty robust with, if you put in in the style of an artist or something, they will just not prompt it anymore. So the technology is catching up to helping people avoid IP infringement. But the ones that aren't, for instance, we use Stable Diffusion, which is offline, and there aren't as many, securities around it unless we implement them ourselves, which we are. However, we still have to educate our staff on how to approach it properly, how to approach prompting and get the style that you're looking for without saying it's in, some architect or some artist style and leveraging their IP to create your own work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, everyone has ethical considerations, but especially architects and creators with all the information that's out there. And so, I can see why you have to be careful. How about other folks within the ecosystem that are not necessarily architects, but are part of your community? What does that collaboration look like with contractors and subcontractors and engineers? And, it seems like the holy grail has always been to get everybody together in one 3D model where everybody can work together and catch all the mistakes. And it's never really panned out that way. I mean, I'm wondering if that's changing and what kind of feedback that you're getting from the collaborators in the design community.
Yeah, I mean, that was the promise of BIM, really, that we would all be able to work in the same model. But the reality is we have tons of different models. They don't link together properly. They're not updating. We're constantly redrawing work and it's super redundant and we're just wasting time, in my opinion. This is where automation can play a role as well in general. But with AI, I think that there's an ability to keep a record of the work that's being done and make sure that we're avoiding the sort of knowledge gaps that we constantly have. And we're all on the same page, essentially. The industry really needs to come together more, though. This is something that I'm really adamant about. And my work with the rest of the community is focusing on how we can have those conversations, how we can build trust. A lot of the discussions are about how we can provide our data to each other in a non-competitive and safe way that will then bring up the industry to deliver good buildings, a good space design. I mean, that's the goal. We don't need to compete as much as we sometimes think we do in architecture and design. And I just think that building that trust, figuring out ways that we can share our knowledge better between our different disciplines, between our different companies, that's really going to get us to a place that people are hoping to get to, so that we can all deliver projects, really good projects, to the public and serve what we're trying to do in the built environment, rather than being concerned with how we can compete with one another.
Is it really about operational efficiency at the end of the day? I mean, delivering a great product to a customer that are getting all their needs met, and that AI has the promise to be able to do that?
AI can absolutely streamline a lot of the work. One of the funny things that happens in my work consistently now is people bring ideas to me, but they're not necessarily ones that AI can solve. They're like, oh, can AI do this? And I say, actually, we can do that with just straight up computation. We've been able to do this and we can. But AI is this new thing where everyone's just, it's a general purpose technology and everyone's paying attention to it. So it's the new exciting thing. And so it's great that they're coming with these ideas of how to streamline their work. I think that with AI specifically, though, it opens up a new channel of the type of work we can do. It's really starting to create new opportunities that we otherwise just don't see with straight up automation. The image generation stuff, it has immense capabilities to transform the way we conceive of buildings. It's really helping us ideate quicker. It's just augmenting the creative process in a way that's never been done before. We can generate ideas so quickly and decide on what makes the most sense and go with that. And it's also opening up new opportunities for work with NBBJ as well. There's a few projects that we've done with visualizing different spaces using style transfer technologies and connecting clients' work with local artwork. There's just new avenues of work that it opens up, more so than any automation tool in the past.
And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing GeekWire podcast, produced by GeekWire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world, and the perfect companion podcast to shift AI. GeekWire podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the GeekWire podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the GeekWire podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Now back to the episode.
It's interesting that you bring up that idea of prototyping, because I can remember as an architecture student sitting and staring at a blank page and wondering how this project is going to start and how these ideas are going to really turn into a finished building. And AI does have the capability of being able to quickly churn a bunch of ideas and turn them into something to get the ball rolling. And I wonder, as it's a kind of a segue into a question for you about people that have impacted you and pushed you as a designer. Like, as you think about the mentors that you've had throughout the years, what's been the most impactful? Who's been the most impactful to you? And how is that showing up now that you are a mentor to others in the firm when it comes to all this computational design? In the context of architecture and prototyping and being inspired, like, who inspires you? So, when you think about your mentors in your life, who inspired you? And now that you have this leadership role in the firm and you're mentoring other people, and how do you think about that from the design aspect of people that can mentor you and inspire you to be a better designer?
Yeah, great question. So one of the mentors that I have in my company is someone named Nate Holland. He's my advocate. He was the person that got me involved in the leadership of the digital work in general in the first place. And he just has this really great thought process of how to approach problems, how to really make things valuable for the work and ensure that we are very much a practice-based studio rather than doing things just sort of disconnected from the work. It's really making sure that we're connected to the clients, connected to the people that we're designing things for. And he has this special focus on the human experience of our work. So he's been a great mentor to me, helping me understand the value that we're really providing to the firm and just approach general leadership challenges like one does. He's really been there by my side, helping out with a lot of different situations as they've come up through the last 4 years. So that's one person that I think has been a great mentor to me through this whole process.
You know, as I look back on architectural history, mentorship and apprenticeship has always been a big part of the tradition of architecture. You think about even Frank Lloyd Wright's studios and all the architects that spun out of those studios. All the famous architects had that happen. And I talk to people a lot on this show about the pandemic and how that changed the way that we show up with each other in the office. Has remote work and working from home affected the design process? Do you have people come into the office every day? Are people working from home Mondays and Fridays? Like, how does it work in an architecture office where collaboration and design are such a big part of what you do?
Absolutely. It very much is. I joined at the peak of the pandemic, like literally June 2020, I arrived. And so I started as a remote worker, and it was very hard to integrate into the culture of the office because people just weren't there. But the really great thing about NBBJ is it was already very networked. It was already very digital. I mean, it's a global company, and especially with the digital team that I began to lead, it was very much an online presence. And we have a great internal blogging system. And I just kind of got in there and started posting a lot of my work. And that's kind of how I made my connections.
Yeah.
So I became very distributed very quickly. I don't think it would have been that way if I joined an office and came in every day and wasn't that connected.
Yeah.
But the whole firm has really been so much more connected now. But also we're trying to get people back in. It's very clear that the mentorship it's more successful a lot of the time when you're in person. That's not the case for everyone. I wouldn't say that that's a blanket statement, but the general culture is you get that kind of mentorship if you're in person. You know, you see someone's screen as you're walking by and you ask what they're up to, or you have those, casual conversations when you're in the kitchen. I've been definitely experiencing that since I've been in Seattle and coming into the office more. People will stop by and say, "Hey, I was trying to use that one AI tool. Have you looked into this?"
Yeah.
Or, "Hey, I've been talking to this one person at this event and would you be interested in joining them on a podcast?" It's just those kind of conversations that don't happen as easily when you have to forcibly message someone on Teams or call them up.
Yeah.
So I think that culture is being really encouraged, and I definitely see the benefit from it. So I also appreciate the networked culture that the company is cultivating.
Yeah. Well, as a futurist, I want you to wave your magic wand here for a second. And I want you to think about the future of work, future of AI, the future of design, and try to describe it in 2 words, and then you can elaborate.
Okay. So the first word would be collective. And this is really because I believe that there's this pooling of information. There's this merging of both human and artificial intelligence. And it's really helping us solve or tackle hard problems and drive innovation. And it's just going to continue to be that way. There's this idea of the collective, this idea of partnership. And like I was mentioning before, the industry and the different disciplines within our industry and across industries really need to come together for this technology to really work out for us. I think that we need a lot more collective effort in general to ensure that the ethics are being governed properly with just the development and use of AI as well. And it needs to be beyond just the single entities or the single companies. It needs to be a collective effort. Then the second word I would use is regenerative. And this is an idea of that there's this continuous renewal of life, of culture, relationships, and collaboration. When you think of AI right now, we're constantly capturing information, like the idea of collecting information. But what it affords us to do is have this living knowledge ecosystem where we can keep that information and recycle it more beyond someone's lifetime in a company or in their working career. We'll have a lot more adaptive expertise because of this. And I like to think that it will help us get to more natural patterns of lifestyle, especially in a work environment, because it's already allowing us to structure our work that fit more of our individual patterns. I think that it's, the more personalized the AI gets, the more it's going to be able to advocate for us to hold true to what makes sense for our working patterns. And, hybrid work already helps that in a way. I think that hybrid will be a constant. The other thing is, I just think that we're going to have more connectedness to nature. We want to have more meaningful, regenerative lifestyles. And I really hope that that's the future. I mean, that's a preferable future. I think it's a very possible future. So, if it's preferable and possible, then there's definitely going to be an effort for that to be the future state.
Well, it's the first time that anybody on the show has used the word regenerative, and I love it in the context of generative AI and all the content creation that we've been talking about. I really, really appreciate you being on the show. It was really fun to talk to you. I'm excited to see how these buildings actually play out post AI and see if there's a big difference. So we'd love to have you back on the show. So Kristen, thank you for being on the Shift AI podcast, and I look forward to having you back again.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Such a pleasure to have Kristen as our guest on today's episode. She brings a unique perspective on how AI and computational design are reshaping architecture, emphasizing the importance of collective effort and regenerative approaches in creating the built environment of tomorrow. If you want to stay connected with Kristen and follow her innovative work in architectural technology, you can find her on LinkedIn. She's frequently sharing insights about the intersection of AI, computational design, and architecture. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on the show, and I'm excited about the ones joining us in the near future. Truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more exciting interviews, and to the Augmented AI Weekly newsletter for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by GeekWire, and we are grateful to have the show sponsored by Augmented AI. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel.